talking about the self-help literature. When I go on my Instagram feed, the first thing I'm seeing is I'm inundated with different self-help advice. There's a reel from David Goggins telling me I need more discipline. There's Andrew Huberman telling me I need to biohack and look at sunlight in the morning. There's someone else telling me I need to work on communication skills. And so it can feel disjointed at times. And I know you've written on the problematic nature of some of the self-help literature. So what is the problem with a lot of the self-help stuff that's out there?
In a sense, a bunch of problems, but it can be overwhelming, right? Because there's a never-ending series of prescriptions, you know, and there's the issue that some of it is of questionable morality, right? It seems like more about manipulating others than, you know, which is not very exciting. And then the question is, how do I fit it all together? You know, because I read a book about time management, I think, oh, just get the time management right, I'm all good, you know. And then I read a book about winning friends, and it's like, oh, if I could just do that right, you know. And like, where do you stop? You know, it's overwhelming. And so what I wanted to do with the Super Habits book is show that at the heart of it all, there is a sort of coherent system that is human, that's fundamentally human, that everything else kind of builds on.
Right.
And much of the self-help literature is just tinkering on the surface. And what you really need to work on is yourself, you know. What at times I've called the human operating system, you know, and what it is in effect your character, right? There's so many different personality tests, right? Good ones, not so good ones, but over the years I've used Myers-Briggs. If you're familiar with Pat Lencioni's Working Genius.
I haven't done that, but I've done the Myers-Briggs before.
Useful, helpful stuff. That stuff is all about the fixed parts of our personality. I mean, they're fixed within kind of a few years, like as children, you know, whether you're extroverted, introverted, you know, whether you're detail-oriented or more big picture.
Right.
You have that. That's sort of almost...
It's your core wiring.
You're not going to change that. You shouldn't try to change that. You shouldn't try to make your people change that, you know. But then there's our character. And that character is always fluid. It's stable, but it can always be changed.
Right.
And what's our character made up of? It's a series of habits that were classically called the virtues, right? And they are the best and most important habits we can have.
Right.
And so that's why I call them super habits, because they're better than any other habits, you know? And once you start to focus at that level, the good self-help stuff starts to fall in line.
To fit in.
Yeah. So for example, Jordan Peterson's books, right?
12 Rules for Life.
For example, yeah. So I took the 12 rules and I went through, and each one of his rules is actually a virtue. And so he doesn't describe them as virtues. I don't even know that he knows that they are virtues.
Right.
But that's what they are. And I think knowing that they're virtues, knowing that they're habits, gives you two really big benefits. One is it's better to have a habit than a rule, because a rule is something you have to memorize, keep remembering.
It's intellectual.
And keep reminding yourself, follow the rule, I didn't follow the rule, I should have. Whereas a habit eventually becomes part of you, becomes literally second nature, right? So you can forget about a habit because you just do it automatically.
Right.
So if you have the habit of orderliness, you don't have to keep reminding yourself of a rule about orderliness. It just becomes so that's one. And the other good news is the virtues are already within us. And so everybody has them, but in many people, they still need to be more developed.
Right.
And that's just not a manner of speaking. It means that anyone can become more orderly or persevere more or become more honest and so on, because they're like muscles in us that have yet to be exercised, yet to be developed. I was on a podcast and he was talking about how he's the climbing coach, right? And so he'd take a new crop of boys climbing, and the next morning they come up to him and go, "Sir, muscles I didn't even know I had are killing me." The virtues are muscles we didn't know we had. They're like mental muscles we didn't know we had. It's very different trying to build one of those habits than, let's say you thought, okay, I need to read more often, so I need to build a habit of reading. That's going to be hard. I mean, I love reading, so it's not hard, but if you don't,
for a lot of people, it's
hard, right? But building a habit of orderliness, building a habit of creativity, building a habit of perseverance, these are not hard if you do it in the right way, because you're playing with what's already in you. That makes sense.
You're just activating the potential that's inside
precisely,
of you.
Precisely.
And it's interesting because I remember reading Atomic Habits, when I was a sophomore in college. And I remember thinking, this is great. I can build any habit I want.
Yep.
But then the question becomes,
which habits
are worth building?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so your book's particularly interesting because you're not just focusing on the mechanism for building habits, but you're actually showing how they all fit together.
Which ones and how they fit together. So in a sense, my book somewhat presumes atomic habits.
Yeah.
And that's partly the reason for the name Super Habits. It's like, yeah, what atomic habits? And now I'll tell you which ones. So follow what he says in terms of how, but I'm telling you which ones, because that makes all the difference. You pick the wrong habits, you're kind of wasting time. But you pick the right ones, it changes your life.
It's also interesting, and you touched on this a second ago. You said how Jordan Peterson's rules, we're talking about the virtues without talking about the virtues. That seems to happen a lot, where a lot of people seem to be using different labels to describe the same thing.
Yep.
Could you, and you talk about this in your book, but could you outline a few of those things, a few of the places, whether it's corporations or self-help literature or social science, where they're talking about this stuff, but they're talking about it in a different way?
Yeah. So the biggest one for me is positive psychology, the field of positive psychology, which has done tremendously good work by doing empirical research, empirical study, scientific research on the virtues. So Aristotle told us, as you grow in virtue, you become happier, right? Positive psychology has proven that empirically. So we'll do all kinds of studies and show that as people grow in any particular virtue, they become happier. One of my favorites, or set of favorites, would be the studies about gratitude. So, gratitude is heavily studied because it's very easy to induce. So if you want to become more grateful, you just keep a gratitude diary every day, every night. Write down things you're grateful for. And if you, at the beginning of that, you measure yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how grateful am I as a person? And you do that 2 months later, your level of gratitude goes up. And so one of the typical studies is you take the control group is doing some exercise that is sort of irrelevant to gratitude. And the test group is keeping a gratitude journal every day for a couple of months. And what they find invariably is that the people who are keeping the gratitude diary relative to the others, they become happier, and it's a lasting happiness. Even if they stop, it carries on for months afterwards.
Right.
So they become happier. They get greater mental health. So if they were suffering from anxiety or depression, that incidence goes down. And this, amazingly, they become physically healthier. So if you had back pain, for example, I actually had this experience myself. I had a bad case of sciatica a couple of years ago. And I started keeping a gratitude diary. Now, to be fair, I also did the steroids, I did the physical therapy, I did Pilates, I did everything I could because you know what it's like to have back problems. It has to stop, right? You make it stop.
Too painful.
So anyway, so I started this diary. So I was bragging to my wife. It's like, this stuff works. She's like, nonsense. That's the steroids. But the funny thing is, after several months, I stopped the diary, and the back pain came back, and then I started the diary, and it went away again. So. I'm not saying this is the end of one, but so positive psychology, a lot of focus on empirical study of the virtues have done us a lot of benefit there. The problem is they keep messing up the terms. So instead of calling them virtues, they call them character strengths. And I don't like that term. Character, good, yes, because the virtues make up your character. When you talk about strengths, people think in terms of things like the Clifton strengths, the Gallup-Clifton, which are the temperament side with the Myers-Briggs and the fixed side.
The fixed side, yeah.
But so implicitly they treat the virtues as if they are kind of fixed characteristics, which they are absolutely not. They are habits, right? So this vast literature doesn't reference very much the fact that the virtues are habits. So that's a kind of a loss and a bit of a confusion,
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. And if there's a friend of yours who you think would benefit from watching this video, make sure you send it to them.